Holly.
Here.
Rachel Miller.
Here.
Lauren Staley-Perry.
Here.
Denise Winfrey.
Here.
Okay, we have 6 members present, we have a quorum. We have minutes from April 12th, any additions or corrections? Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. New business, we have case 6287 MV2. Kim, can you give us an update?
Thank you. Good morning. Zoning case 6287-MV2 takes place in Custer Township. The applicants request a map amendment from E2 to A1 for the purpose of continuing agricultural use and to correct a violation. The case was heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on May 3rd. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved the amendment with a 5-to-1 vote. The case went before the Planning and Zoning Commission with 2 variances. The variances were for lot area and lot frontage. They were also approved. It appears that there is at least one valid individual written protest. Final determination will be made tomorrow. Should the state's attorney's office determine that there is a valid legal objection, the approval of the map amendment will require a supermajority vote by the county board. Currently, the owners operate a horse boarding facility, which is permitted within the E2 zoning district. The applicant was cited for constructing an addition to the existing building exceeding the allotted number of animals within the E2 district. The applicant desires to correct the violation with a map amendment. The objector has raised questions pertaining to the existing horse arena and questioned if the structure is a compliant structure. The existing horse stable is a compliant structure and was issued building permit 0400876 by Land Use Department in 2004. The general location of the subject property is southwest of Route 113 and west of South River Lane. The property is 10 acres that consists of 9.1 acres in Will County and 0.82 acres in Kankakee County. The property is zoned E2 on the Will County side, and the portion under Kankakee County jurisdiction is zoned A1. The property is surrounded by A1 on 3 sides, with E1 to the north. The surrounding area is primarily zoned A1 in Will County and also A1 in Kankakee County. The property was originally zoned A1. The land was divided by a deed trust in 1999. The property did not undergo a subdivision process at that time or receive zoning approval and was not in compliance with the zoning ordinance at the time of its creation. In 2002, a map amendment occurred, zoning case 5008-M, from A1 to E2. Due to the deficient lot area with deficient lot frontage, the parcel was deemed an illegal parcel. The zoning case brought the property into compliance for the purpose of allowing the construction of a single-family residence. At that time, in 2002, the use was agricultural and cropped with corn. In 2003, land use issued building permit for the residence, and in 2004, the permit for the horse and riding arena. For all practical purposes, the property meets the lot requirements of an A1 property with 10 acres and more than 300 feet of lot frontage. The Custer Township Comprehensive Plan designates this area for agricultural use. In 2002, at the time of the rezoning, the Will South Cook Soil and Water Conservation District classified this land as essential farmland. On February 16, 2016, the case was heard by the Custer Township Board and unanimously voted for approval. An amendment to A1 is consistent with the Will County Land Resource Management Plan. The property is located within the agricultural preservation area. Staff recommends approval of map amendment from E2 to A1. That concludes staff analysis.
Thank you. We have a number of speakers signed up on this case. First, are there any questions by the committee? Okay. We'll go to the people that have asked to speak. Ken Carlson. Would you like to come down to the podium?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Ken Carlson. I'm the applicant's attorney. It's a strange case because it's a 10-acre parcel. You know, there's a little better than 3/4 of an acre sitting in Kankakee County. Otherwise, we'd be dealing with what would be a conforming potential A1 parcel. The Martineaus have operated the boarding facility since 2005. There are currently 20 horses at that facility. One of the conditions on one of the variances to limit, on the lot size variances, to limit the number of horses to 20 horses. So this doesn't become an unlimited A1 horse problem. I think the testimony that the PZC heard clearly indicated the extent to which the applicants maintain the property, the husbandry practices that they place on the property. They rotate pastures, they clean the paddocks. They testified at that hearing as to how they dispose of the manure from the property, and that it's placed on a field that's 1,800 feet from the nearest off-site residential property. And there was no contrary evidence presented at that hearing, other than an objector saying that the horses are knee-deep in manure, which quite frankly was contradicted by all the testimony and photographs, I think, submitted by the applicants at that hearing. The applicants have no desire to have any more than 20 horses. They have no desire to have any other farm animals on that property. They've indicated their willingness to allow whatever conditions need to be placed on the variance to restrict those. They've indicated their willingness to cause a restriction to be recorded with the county recorder's office. But it would seem to me this operation has been in existence for 11 years now. It was in existence as a result of a county issuing a building permit for it. What happened last year was that my client was going to put on an addition to the existing building so that he could store his equipment in that facility rather than having equipment sitting outside. You know, honestly, didn't get a building permit. When he found out he needed a building permit, they immediately met with staff, and I think everything that they have done throughout the course of this has indicated a good faith effort on their part to be compliant with the ordinance of Kankakee County. Of Will County. I think if what we want to do is encourage our rural community and the things we think are good for our community, those rural characteristics, this is a perfect use for that area. It's immediately across from the state conservation riding trails. Other people have what the objector has horses. And I think there's been no evidence presented that there's any harm to public health, safety, or welfare by the continuance of the use on this parcel. We'd ask for your recommendation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. The applicants are here.
Any questions by committee members?
Yeah, the 10 acres is contiguous, right?
Well, yeah, the 10 acres is contiguous. 9.17 acres is in Will County. The county line is at that 9.1. The other 3/4 of an acre is immediately across in Kankakee County.
Okay. Is that across the road or is it?
No.
Okay, so
It's
they're
across the
line-
imaginary county line.
Okay, so, okay, all right, thank you.
Ray?
So the total property is 10 acres,
Right.
even after, so the A1 will only go portion on the 9.18 acres, correct?
If you were to amend, the A1 would apply to the 9.17 acres with a variance for lot size.
Right, okay. Then I'd be okay with the 10, because where I was going with this, sometimes the board readjusts the zoning, and then we have a byproduct that comes down later, And the cell tower companies start picking up these A1 properties, and the next thing you know, they got these cell towers popping up on, right next to residential areas. But if this property is 10 acres in whole, then it doesn't apply here, so okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Paula McArnes. Paula, did you want to come up and say anything?
Mr. Chairman, those are my clients, so unless there are questions.
Okay. And Ron also?
Right. He's also.
Okay. Tim McGrath in the front. State your name, please.
Good morning, Tim McGrath. I'm the attorney for Leon and Christy Bain, who are the neighbors to the north. The reason for our objection is, first we'd like to discuss the planning aspect of this. The property is zoned currently E2. My client to the north, his property is zoned E1. There's a total, I believe, of 8 parcels going up the north. All are zoned estate zoning. When my client purchased the property, it was zoned E1. The neighbor's property was zoned E2. That meant that it was a residential zoning and there was to be no commercial. Looking at the staff report, I see that this became a lot of record in October 26th of the year 2000. The staff brings up the point that this could have been, it was just short because part of the property was in Kankakee County, it would have been A1. The issue is, that's really not, the issue is, but they did rezone it. The property was rezoned to E2. That's what happened. I suppose the applicant at that time could have come in 2002 and requested a variance to remain in A1 and request a variance on lot size and frontage. That's not what was done. What was done is it was rezoned. So I think to kind of go back after someone violates the ordinance and then try to bootstrap it with this, what happened back in 2002 is really unfair to my clients. When they bought this property, it was E2, E1, and allowed 1 horse per acre. So yes, Martin House could have up to 9 to 10 horses, however the county would calculate it. My client has 9 acres. He could have 9 horses. They go back, the staff says, well, this was spot zoning. Well, the bottom line is, that's the way it was zoned. I mean, the county board approved this zoning back in the early 2000s. They approved it all to D1 and E2. This is what they did. The surrounding uses have not changed. Nothing has really changed since this was all rezoned back in the early 2000s. The only thing that's changed is basically the Martinells built their home. Then they built they got a permit for an accessory building, which was in excess of 3,000 square feet. Part of that, I believe, is because they get to deduct what they use for horse stables. But here, they build this building, and they know it's not supposed to be commercial, and immediately they build a building and they use it for commercial purposes. So we have that, and then they go on, and then they add on again, and don't get a building permit. And so now that we've violated the ordinance, we're now supposed to come back and say, okay, it was really all a mistake. Let's rezone the property back to A1. I mean, that is not fair to my clients. They bring up the fact that my client has horses. Yes, he has 3. He is allowed to have up to 9, but he has 3. They say that the surrounding area keeps horses. Well, yes, all estate zoning, they can all have horses. But they can't have horses and board horses over the limit for commercial purposes. That's the whole point of this. My clients realize they believe, and they had 20 horses on a 10-acre parcel of this size with narrow lot that it is too many horses for that area. And that is their issue. They also they brought up the issue my client talked about, they do have, their house is within 100 feet of the stables. Sorry about that. So, if you look at this, let me get it down properly. This is the Martinhouse property. Here's the outbuilding. This is an overview. This is the outbuilding, the buildings, their house, their pool. Where if you see 2, 3, and 4 here, let me put this up here, I'm sorry. Here is where the pasture, the stables are, and this is where my client's home is, right here. As you can see, this is a very big building, and like I say, my client he put accessory use building up, and he had to comply with the ordinance, which was 3,000 square feet. Here's their house over here. So it is close. There's, the dirt. There's, 20 horses is a lot. He bargained for 9 to 10. Now we're doubling it to 20. Okay. I realize, the Martinells are in this situation, but it's not really all about them. It's also about the neighbors. There's a neighbor across the street that is here. She's not going to come up and say anything, but she lives across the street. They're against it. We put up with, my client is concerned about, again, the manure, because there is a difference, again, between 10 and 20 horses. And it's been as high as 22, though I think they said 2 of the horses may have been ponies. Further, we're talking about, we have Carol Eckert from the she's an environmentalist. She is going to be running testing on the runoff and the amount of manure that is on the property, whether a 10-acre parcel such as this can handle 20 horses. So this is something, because there's runoff, there's a ditch that flows into the Kankakee River. So, and there could be issues with, wells and that type of thing. This is, again, an estate zoning area. This is not commercial. And 20, I guess there's a reason for they have e-zoning. E-zoning says 1 horse per acre. There must be a reason for that's what it should be. Now, I guess again, when we violate, when we add on without a building permit, and then we're coming back and we're saying, geez, well, it was all a mistake. We never should have done this to begin with. It's wrong, and it's not fair to my client and to their way of life and to what they bargained for and what the neighbors bargained for when this was zoned estate zoning, which is residential zoning, not commercial zoning. I do have Carol here from Environmental, where she can...
Okay, state your name, please.
My name is Carolyn Eckert. I own Eckert Environmental Services. We're based out of Vermont. I do phase 1 soil sampling, underground storage tank removal, that type of thing. I know that there has been some concern on behalf of the neighbors that the general consensus is that 1 horse per acre is the amount of land that it takes to support a horse and the manure. If that amount is exceeded, generally there needs to be a specific management plan in place to ensure the well-being of the horses themselves and the surrounding land and waterways. If you have 20 horses, that is going to generate about 50 pounds of manure per day. You can also add in 50 pounds of bedding per day per horse. If you multiply that out by 20 horses, you are looking at 730,000 pounds of manure being graded onto a 9-acre or 10-acre property. Some of that manure needs to be either shipped off, and there needs to be some sort of management plan in place, or you're going to have contamination of the well next door and runoff into the Kankakee River. And I think that that's something that should be explored. So that's all.
Thank you. Questions by committee?
Yeah. Are all 10 acres being utilized currently though? Or that 0.82 acres, is that fenced off?
Microphone.
Or is it all-
Use your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you talking to the V or to the applicant?
You did environmental on it? Or
I visited the adjoining property yesterday. I've been recently brought into the fold, so I'd like to, investigate a little bit further. But as far as I know, it's all used. I know that the area that they pointed out to me where the manure is graded seems to be in the same spot, and it seems to be graded in the same area over and over. I'm just speaking from what I've been told. I have not personally witnessed this, but I think that maybe some sort of management plan and a layout of how they plan to rotate and where everything is being graded would be would help.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant then. Are all 10 acres being utilized?
Yeah, altogether. Not for boarding purposes, but I mean, there are portions of the 10 acres which are used for pasture.
Okay, so we're currently using 10 acres entirely?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions by committee?
Just to comment, and maybe Carl or Martin knows can speak to that, but I was at the zoning commission meeting, and I believe that I heard that part of this manure is taken off-site for farmers to use for their fields. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, part of what the testimony at the Plan Commission heard was, in fact, a management plan. How the paddocks were rotated, 2 and 3 horses, they were rotated so the grass pastures were not worn down to soil. The manure was hauled off daily to a field that is 1,000 feet from the property and 1,800 feet from the nearest off-site residence. So the plan was in fact laid out. There was letters submitted from the veterinarians who service that facility relating to the health of those horses, but that was all testimony that was in fact presented. And nowhere in this testimony at the PZC did we hear anything about concerns about the Kankakee River, about environmental investigations, and that's all outside of the public hearing.
But may I say, I just want to add one thing about, they did bring up about the Custer Township Planning Commission. I did talk to Bruce Tannum, who's the supervisor down there. He told me that he didn't realize my client was objecting. There really wasn't, nor was my client even notified to come to that. I guess they don't do that. So I just, when that was read, I wanted to bring that to your attention that they just approved it. They thought it was just a code violation. They didn't have any idea, again, that my client was involved or was, anyone was objecting. So I just wanted to bring that to your point. And I think, we're talking about, that it's a nice, stable or what have you, but that's only part of the point here, I think. 20 horses is a lot. That isn't what my client bargained for. It's not what the zoning required. Everyone is supposed to be responsible to understand what the zoning is when they buy that property. And this easily could have probably been handled way in the beginning, where somebody could have come in here and just gone to the PZC and requested a variance to have it remain in A1. But that's not what was done. That was not what was done. The whole thing, 8 parcels zoned estate. I think we really have to look at that. What the neighbors and everyone else when they bought the property, what they were getting into.
Bob, did you have another question?
Yeah, basically this is for land use. If, let's go back to that so that we can get clarification on that. If we recognized all 10 acres in Will County, this would be a permissible use to go back to A1, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that we also have other horse farms that have 10 acres that have 20 horses on there?
The criteria in the zoning ordinance for the A1 district is 10 acres with 300 feet of lot frontage. And yes, there are other farmers, several in Will County that meet those criteria.
Okay.
And if it is A1, am I correct that there is not a limitation on the number of horses?
That's correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Steve, you have a comment?
Yeah, this was initiated by a code violation, correct? All this process?
Yes.
And I'm sure it wasn't an aerial photo or none of that, but we won't go into that. I'm sure that wasn't the case. But where did this initiate out of? Was it a complaint from the city or from a person or from who?
In this particular case, I believe it's appropriate to share because during the public hearing,
I can't hear you.
During the public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission, the objector announced that he was the origin of the complaint that we received. Mr. McGrath's client.
Okay, and that kind of answers my question. It seems to me like this has been going on since 2002 or 2004 or whatever, and all of a sudden we got a problem?
The complaint, we received a complaint at
Did you
the
get
end
a
of
complaint in
2015.
2005 saying, did they complain about it in 2006,
The only-
2007?
The only complaints on file were from
I
2015.
don't remember my client saying.
Right, but that's what I had to clarify. So it's something that was initiated by the party that doesn't like, by the neighbor, and now it's coming to light after 14 years or 16 years, whatever.
That appears to be.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
Actually, I don't remember that being said. Actually.
No, I didn't. I'm Christy, I'm the owner of the property with my husband. And look, we don't have a problem with them having their boarding business. We don't have a problem with them having their horses. They added an addition for more horses. Where does it stop? How many are we going to have? You know, next 6 months, am I going to have 10 more horses over there? That is our concern. Our concern is that it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody is helping us to stop it. That's the problem that we have. I like horses. I have horses. I'm fine with what they had when we originally moved in there, and they had their 14 or their 16 horses. I am totally fine with that. I'm not fine with it getting bigger and bigger, and I live in their dirt. Their manure that they say they take off property, that is a lie. They drive their manure spreader around their property over and over and over again. They stopped doing it when this all came about and we complained. It's 10 feet out my bedroom, 100 feet out my bedroom window. I can't open the windows in my house. Their place is so overgrazed, there's this much dirt, I can't open my windows. I can't open my windows in my house because it's nothing but dirt in there. We're not asking them to close their business. We just don't want any more. We don't want any more growth over there. And then they build this, yeah, we didn't say anything before because we didn't care. But now they build this addition and now there's more. So now I care. I don't want any more.
What was your name, please?
Christy.
Christy
And you're
Bank.
the-
Christy Bank.
You're the objector?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why they, at 15 horses, that's why it was, they put an add-on addition with no building permit, and now we're supposed to say, okay, let's add more horses. And, you know, and it just keeps kind of going on and on. So I think they've been pretty generous, because that's not, what again, what they bargained for and what they were supposed to be getting.
Any comments by committee? Judy?
So
So Kirk, you said there's no limit on the number of horses that you can have with a 10-acre parcel if you zoned A1.
The A1 zone, that's correct. The A1 zoning district is not within the zoning ordinance place limitations on the number of animals, which the zoning ordinance calls an animal unit.
Is the agreement that you guys have given them with the variance, does that put any restrictions on them at all or no? No, because they get A1, then they can have what they want, right?
Well, it's that the commission approved it with conditions.
I'm sorry?
The commission approved the zoning case with conditions, and variances.
The condition was 20 horses?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, we can have that included in our recommendation.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as you know, the variances come to a conclusion at the level of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The matter that is before you today is a map change. And the provisions, you can seek advice from council on this, but our understanding is that a map change as such cannot be made with conditions. However, the variances which are decided upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission did include such a condition.
So they're already in place? Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay, could we have a motion?
Motion
to approve.
Wait, I just want to clarify.
One more comment.
So what you're saying with the variances ending at the PZC, if we make a motion to approve this and it gets approved, the limitation of 20 horses follows that map change, or does it erase that?
No. The limitation was associated with the variances, and those were approved. Actually, if you were to turn down this map change request, then the variances would be somewhat meaningless at that point, because they were needed in order to undertake the use that's being discussed at the present time. However, if the board ultimately approved the map change, then you would be able to have A1, which would allow the 20 horses, but the variances that have been acted upon by planning and zoning would be in place, and as has been indicated, have as an attachment, an integral part to them, a condition related to their continued viability being contingent upon a limitation on the number of horses.
Okay, Steve, you made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Next case, 6299-S, Wolf's Crossing. Kim?
Zoning case 6299-S occurs in Cleveland Township. The petitioner would like to amend special use permit 6246-S for a sports and recreation participant to allow the Naperville Diamond Softball League to operate in additional units. The original zoning case 6246-S was approved by the Will County Board in June of 2015. The property is a multi-unit complex, and the initial request was for units L and Q. The tenant desires to expand and occupy units J, K, L, Q, and R. The general location of the property is south of West Will Crossing Road and east of Viola Road. The property is zoned I-1 with City of Aurora residential abutting to the north, I-1 to east and south, and City of Naperville residential within close proximity to the west. Staff recommends approval of the amendment to the special use permit for a sports and recreation participant with one condition. That concludes staff analysis.
Any questions by committee? Okay, there's no questions. Could we, are there any objectors to this change? No objectors? We have a motion to approve. Motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Other business, text amendment for multi-purpose fueling stations. We lost our staff. David, we want to talk about the fueling station?
Excuse me. We were requested to place this on the agenda for committee for discussion. Sorry, apologies. And we've conducted some preliminary work on this, and I know the discussion come up with, we've had a couple of these facilities that have been larger. They've included, car washes, drive-throughs, and things of that nature. That we've seen actually not just within Will County, but within municipal limits as well. And there's a concern about the design of the facilities, location of the facilities, and how can the county better control them. And one of the things that I've noted other jurisdictions do is that they will limit automobile fueling stations, for example, to pump islands, and perhaps 4 pump islands with a maximum of 2 pumping units per island. So there's a way to try to address the size of the facility and the traffic that's generated by limiting the number of fueling pump islands. Another way to deal with that is that some jurisdictions will prohibit no standalone diesel fueling pump islands, and therefore you kind of get away from the standalone pumping islands that take care of trucks specifically or semi-tractor trailers, because when every gas station will, on the pump islands, every pumping unit does typically have a diesel pump. Just pretty much everyone, because there's certainly a lot of passenger vehicles use diesel, but you won't have the tractor trailers that will mix in with passenger vehicles. So that's an avenue as well. We have options of how we want to address this, where we could, again, address the size of the facility by pump islands and perhaps convenience retail only, and that we have additional uses such as drive-throughs and car washes of that nature. We could continue dealing with that as a special use individually, or we could try to address it more as a planned unit development holistically. The code can be crafted in a lot of different ways to try to address it as the committee desires. And I know that the chairman has mentioned before trying to possibly just dealing with those particular types of uses as a PUD. So I guess what we can do today is if you have any initial reaction to what I mentioned, I can take that and then we can start trying to prepare some draft text for your consideration. And once we have some text finalized, then we can take it to public hearing.
Okay. Tim, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, thank you. These type of facilities can vary considerably. I'm sure we've all traveled around, and you can see some of these are really mega, where they may have 3 different types of eating establishments. They have maybe sit-down restaurants. They have fast food. They have car washes. They have pretty large. They'll have a 15,000, 20,000 square foot store. I mean, they can really be large, and those are the mega ones, which we have not had to deal with to this point, but certainly that comes into the mix. We've dealt with where you have really what it comes down to is 3, 4, 5 businesses that are really almost standalone businesses that are put under one roof and say this is a gas station. No, it's not. A stacking of cars, getting cars on the property, the inner flow of these facilities is important. I've gone in some and it's like so jammed it's confusing. Where am I going? I'm actually sometimes surprised there's not considerable amount of little bumps on the facility themselves that are running into each other. And I do think, because there's such a variety of what these types of facilities can be, you know, I do think we should perhaps look at these types of developments as PUDs, where we can actually have a lot of input on how they're designed, how you want cars stacked, what you're going to allow, what you may not allow, and there's a lot of give and take. And then they would come back as, you know, then the staff would bring it back as a planned unit development versus using a series of special use permits. I think ultimately we will get a much better development. This is really what most municipalities do with these types of facilities. They're planned unit development, so there's a lot of input on design and how we're going to bring it forward. So that would be my suggestion. I certainly believe that since we've dealt with a number of these, or a couple of these at least, in recent times, that you know, we bring this forward in a fairly timely manner. Thank you.
Any comments by the committee? Bob?
Yeah, recently I believe, it's not, sorry. Recently they just completed the sale, or it's going to be approved for Balmoral Racetrack. It's approximately 200 acres, and I believe the purchaser is I believe he is in the gaming industry, plus also he's actually in the truck stop industry. Now, my concern with that is that we spend a lot of time and effort basically trying to design these for someone else. I would like to see more of a specific areas identified, and then we would work with the municipalities that are closest to it, or who are going to actually end up probably annexing them into the municipality. Because again, there's our county is very diverse. It has different needs. Okay, and again, I think the time and effort that we could spend on this, I think, would be better spent actually working with the local municipalities, basically looking at what they're actually looking at for designing in the future. So I mean, if we could kind of take a look at that, I mean, that's something that I'm sure you could probably easily obtain that information, you know, and then, you know, again, and this one probably, my guesstimate on it is probably it end up being annexed then eventually anyway. So, and again, it's 200 acres, and they're going to carve off, what we were told is they're going to carve off a corner of it for a truck stop. And with the freight movement through Will County, we actually have a lot of freight movement through eastern Will County. So I'm sure it's going to be designed for the semi-truck to actually move in and out of, you know, easily. So, and again, there's also a need for small retail stores, stop and go type shopping out there too. So I mean, I'm sure it's going to have a diversification, as Jim was referring to, as far as the basically a bunch of a grouping of small stores in there with their own identities. So I would be interested in seeing something like that moving forward. So to be more efficient on this. So, thank you.
If I may just clarify one thing, Mr. Howard. When a zoning authority has a PUD process in place, we're not designing it. It's a collaboration of trying to meet certain goals, and what the developer actually receives is very often relaxation of other rules. So it's really a collaboration. The developer still does the design, but you try to incorporate certain components in that design. So when you say we're not designing, I want to make it clear, and maybe David or Kurt could also comment. We're not designing it. We're looking for certain characteristics within the design, which we talk to the developer about. And most developers, by the way, find the process very favorable to them. They wind up getting pretty much many of the components of their design incorporated. And at least my experience has been that developers prefer that process rather than going through a special use process. So I just want to make that clear to his understanding of the PUD. I know some of you probably worked with it, Ray's, but I'm sure worked with it and wells and so forth. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, recently, and what I meant by that, recently we actually, with the, I think it's called Food and Fuel on Harlem, basically that was a long, painful discussion that continued on and on. And basically, we were, I believe, putting our desires and components in for actually redesigning a project that actually he designed. So again,
That's not true at all, Bob.
I think we actually...
That's my district, that's just absolutely, that statement is just not, I don't want to debate this with you, is just not true.
Let me finish, Jim.
Just so you know. Well,
Yeah, so anyway, I mean...
these statements that are not factual, I'm going to call you on.
Yeah.
So just go ahead.
Okay. But anyway, what I mean by that is actually with our, we require berms and our suggestions about, increasing the height of the berms, the type of fencing, the type of greenery that we actually request on there. Again, and I had worked for a developer in the past, and I mean, basically that, that's a system of working it out. And that's why I would like to see the desires.
It's required within our ordinance.
Correct, but we can also add into it, and we actually do add into it. So I'm just saying that, I think that's something to look at. And again, this is a new product that's coming out. We haven't been, I don't think approached with this type of development in the past, and I think that's something that we can work closer with our municipalities on. So that was my suggestion on this.
Ray?
I would be strongly in favor of a plan unit development type process. Basically, if you look at a plan unit development, I worked with them for 12 years in New Lenox. It's essentially when you take a combination of different uses or the same uses, compatible uses, varied uses, and you lump them all into one project, that's really the definition of what a plan unit development is. So in these cases, when you have a service business, when you have a fueling station, when you have a place to eat, a place to get coffee, drive-throughs, the plan unit development gives the staff so much flexibility in what they're able to do, and also allows the petitioner to have flexibility as well. So when you combine that, not only does it not stick the project in a quagmire because you're going through all these different loopholes and going A to Z, it allows you to bring one whole project together, and oftentimes the residents that live around the plan units developments are a little better off because the staff is able to demand certain things regarding the perimeters, the size, and I just think it'll simplify the entire process, and it'll give the county board what we're looking for while giving the petitioner what they're looking for too. I think it's a win-win.
Okay, Judy?
Okay, so I, of course, represent East Rural County as well, and know that there could be all different potential plans for the Vail Mill racetrack. And I know that the residents out there would definitely favor a PUD because I think we really need to be able to incorporate them into and protect them from a developer coming in. There, right now, where the Vail Mill racetrack is, it's no direct route right off of 394 into there. They have to take a little side road which goes past a bunch of little homes. So they would have to come with a whole new entrance, which I'm sure the developer would do. So we probably want to look at that, the placement of where the entrance would be on 394 is, of course, controlled by the state as well. They have some input in that. So I'm just really concerned that I know this area, I know the people in that area, I know what they've been in favor of, and I think that we do want to make sure that what is developed there, we do want it developed because it's a good piece of property to develop. It's off of 394, but we want to make sure that it does fit in nicely with the surrounding area. It doesn't look like a truck stop off of 57, which is a completely different world out there than it is off of 394 because there's so much, trees and forest preserves and land like that. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to do the PUD. I think that it would give us a lot of options. So I definitely support that as well.
Any other comments by committee?
Yeah, I just have a question.
Steve?
when we're talking about a PUD, which seems like, I don't see a problem with it, but I do have a question. When you have existing businesses that are struggling, so they're pretty much going to go out of business a lot of times. So now you'll see a Dunkin' Donuts and a Baskin Robbins together in one store. Well, now what happens if those two groups get together and say, you know what, we're not making enough money to survive here. Let's get a Taco Bell and put a Taco Bell in on the other wall. Does that come into this PUD type of thing, or is that just something that's allowed because it's already built and they're just adding on, adding a business in there? You know, what would happen there? Because I think in the future we're going to be seeing more than one franchise in a building, in a small building. I know.
Yeah, we got it.
Nice answer.
Yeah, we'll give it to you.
I think one of the things we do is look at how we would address existing businesses, and we do that whenever we modify the zoning or any other ordinances. Well, how is it going to affect existing businesses? And if something becomes what's called non-conforming, meaning being legally established and longer compliant, there are provisions in the ordinance about allowing that business to continue and how and when it can be expanded. And I think under consideration for this is, I think when we create a PUD process for this type of use, when we set those parameters and boundaries, that's something we'll have to think about, is if you have an existing Dunkin' Donuts and they want to add a drive-through, is that something we want to include into this larger PUD process, or is that something we're going to say that's okay, go through a special use process? But if it becomes part of a gas station, drive-through, car wash, well, then it might flip into a PUD process. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Well, in other words, like, I know the guy that owns Dunkin' Donuts, Homer Glen, he has a Dunkin' Donuts and a Baskin Robbins. And you go in there, and there's nobody there. So he said that he'd like to find another business. Does another business indicate?
If there's, within a commercial zoning district, there are permitted retail uses. And if somebody has two permitted retail uses, two commercial stores, let's say a Dollar General, and a convenience store next door, and they want to put the dry cleaners, and it's permitted. That's something that would be authorized. I think we're talking more about.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Does stuff like that, if existing businesses, multiple businesses, decide to expand with another business, it's not in a PUD.
The point is that working as a committee, as we would write the terms of the ordinance of where a PUD approach would come into play, there'd be certain triggering events. If it was an existing authorized commercial business operating in a commercial zone that simply within, say, the same square footage that they had, the same basic footprint, just wanted to add another line of business, then it's unlikely that we would set that as the threshold for going over to a PUD approach. If, however, they wanted to not only add a different business category to their existing framework, but wanted to add many of these other attributes, wanted to add a car wash, wanted to add a drive-through. And we would specify that. However, this group decided they wanted to specify it, and it would only be in those situations where it rose to that threshold where their business proposal had those attributes that we'd say, okay, under that circumstance, we'll go through the PUD approach. Does that help?
Yeah. Judy?
So I think that, we're looking at a time where we have Wilmington, there's new, intermodal freight facilities going up. So of course, somebody's going to want to purchase a piece of property, and right off the highway off of 55, there's, I forget the road, Lorenzo Road, and that. We have some of that there now, probably not as big as it might get at some point. So I think it makes a lot of sense to put a good plan in place so that we're not behind the eight ball here. We're definitely up front, making a good plan that works with the surrounding area to the best that you can, and the local residents, by protecting them, by putting things in place and working with this PUD. So then we can also offer the grill for a developer to come in and say, hey, I'd like to come in here, put this in, and then we have a nice process in place so we don't have to have the worries such as we did on Harlem, where some of us felt that it was the wrong, too many uses in a very confined area, something like that. So I think that's a great thing, and I think we should make it as robust as we can at this point, you know, take all the possibilities into play that we know of today.
Okay, David, do you have enough direction now? Do you think you got the scope of what we're talking about? So if you want to have a small fueling station, that's fine, but if you want to add these other things, we want a PUD for that. Okay?
The direction is sufficient.
Okay, you'll bring something back. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is ECHO ordinance. Who wants to speak to that? Kurt?
Mr. Chairman, you'll notice on your agenda that the item was brought forward by County Board Member Gould, so I certainly don't want to preempt him if he wanted to open up, or do you want to join him in the later point?
My time is limited, so if I could go first, because I have to leave, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Fine.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for putting this on the agenda and allowing me to speak to the committee this morning. An issue arose in my district with respect to ECHO housing, and some individuals in the area are here who would also like to address the committee this morning. And my understanding is that when the ordinance was written in 2012, that the county board no longer votes on ECHO. Is that correct? But prior to 2012, did we vote?
The point is, in essence, you are correct. It used to be classified as a special use.
Special use.
Which would ultimately, as you know, require a vote of the full county board. At that revision of the zoning ordinance, this topic, along with many, many others, were taken out of the special use category and made by right of a particular zoning category.
Okay, thank you. And appreciate that. And some issues have arisen, special use permit. Should that come back into the fold? Should we require a special use permit again for ECHO housing so that people can address their elected officials and their elected officials can actually take a vote on whether they think that this is proper in a given area? Another question is the diminution of property values with ECHO housing, and I had put a copy of the DuPage County ordinance in everyone's mailbox, and residents have asked me, why in Will County do we allow detached, and in DuPage their ordinance says that they have an attached ECHO housing, which actually has to maintain the look of a single family residence. So there's a lot of issues to discuss, issues about purpose, and is the purpose of ECHO for an ailing resident, or is it just strictly age-based or income-based? So I would just like the committee to revisit this question of ECHO housing in general, and then perhaps, in my opinion, I'd like to just see it become a special use again, but I would like the committee to research this along with the staff and see if we can come up with a better system and one that's going to protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments by Kurt? Did you want to add some more comments?
Oh, certainly. Certainly knowing that this matter is going to be on the agenda today, we tried to prepare a little bit of briefing for you so that we can start moving forward on the topic that Mr. Gould has brought forward. Just so we can put this into some kind of context, the general idea of ECHO housing, which basically stands for Elderly Cottage Housing Opportunity, is a concept that has been around nationally. This isn't just a Will County thing or just an Illinois thing. It's been around nationally since the 1980s. I don't know whether this is good or bad, but the concept was actually an import from Australia, where they had started to experiment with it, and in that context referred to it as granny flats, which these days we probably wouldn't use that kind of terminology, but that's how it was referred to. And coming to the United States in the 1980s, it began to move into adoption in a number of states. I don't have to tell you, we're all very well aware that the growth of the elderly population is very dynamic, that it's growing very, very rapidly. And questions of providing sufficient and adequate housing for the elderly is a concern of society as a whole. There's a wide range of options that are available to deal with the fundamental question of maintaining some degree of independence while at the same time providing some degree of support. There's any number of arrangements for that. But I think it's just important to remember, why did we set this up in the first place? The idea was that among the options available to a family in unincorporated Will County that was dealing with the challenges of providing independent housing but also supportive housing for an elderly member of the family or someone who was disabled, perhaps needed to have this type of option. And again, what is this type of option? Not only in our ordinance, but in most ordinances. I've not had an opportunity yet to read the DuPage ordinance, but it may be different. But in most instances, this concept, eco housing, does contemplate the notion of placing an additional temporary housing structure on the parcel where a primary residence already exists. That's the model. That was adopted close to 2 decades ago by Will County. A rather innovative approach for the time. Now, since that time, and this will be pertinent, I'm sure, to your deliberations, is it something that there was like a land rush business, that our office was full of people clamoring for the process of obtaining an echo unit? The answer to that is no. In almost 2 decades, right at the present moment, we know of 18 units in unincorporated Will County that went through the process, most of those when it was still a special use permit, some subsequently when it was not, to obtain authorization for an echo unit. I think it's important for you to realize under how this program works currently is that once the person establishes their eligibility for participation under the program, we go through the building permit process, determine whether the standards have been met for the nature and type of temporary unit that's going to come in. And then many people ask the question, well, if this is meant to be temporary arrangement, what do you do when grandma passes on to the great beyond? Well, they are required under the terms of the ordinance to file an annual affidavit. And we pursue them. We don't wait passively to get it if it's gone past a certain date. They must file an affidavit that indicates that the same or similar and also qualifying conditions still remain. In other words, that either grandma is still there who was there at the time that it was set up, or another individual who meets the criteria specified in the ordinance is now residing in the facility. If those conditions are not met, then they are no longer able to have an echo unit under the zoning ordinance, and the unit has to be removed. That's the context that I wanted to provide for you. David might want to provide some additional details.
Okay. The zoning ordinance does prescribe specific requirements currently with regard to the echo units. More specifically, it refers to maximum square footage requirements for living space and how many bedrooms may be permissible. It also stipulates that they must be mobile home or detached pre-manufactured home with removable foundation. And typically, these are units that have a HUD sticker for under federal guidelines. It also stipulates, again, the specific requirements for the eligibility of the individuals that reside within the unit. And again, as Kurt indicated, these are reviewed annually. And we are proactive that we do pursue them and to get verification that they're still eligible to be on the property. And I know that one thing I just wanted to kind of possibly touch off on, going into the next step of the discussion, but I guess at this point, are there any questions on the basics of the echo process and the echo units?
Steve? Yeah, I just said, one, when you do an echo home, it's basically a trailer, right? Most of the time? A manufactured home. Well, is there a property tax assessment increase? So the people that have the Echo have to pay more money because their adjusted value of their property goes up?
Dawn may be able to shed some light on that. Ultimately, it's going to be a question for the assessor's office, but she does have some information.
After we receive the affidavit from each Echo individual, a report is given to the assessor's office, so they know where in Will County those exist, and then they do their analyzation.
But their taxes increase because they have that.
I don't know the results of the taxes, but they do their analysis on that unit.
And then if we did like what Don was talking about, where it would have to be attached to the house, there would be a tax increase. And then what do you do if the senior passes away, and then now you're supposed to remove the Echo house?
Well,
and it's attached, so you can't remove, you could remove it, I suppose, but.
I think you've raised a very interesting point, that it is, in terms of the basic model, there's infinite variety of models if you go and look throughout the United States. But the fundamental concept is that it's a temporary, removable facility that is there to deal with a certain set of circumstances. And when those circumstances no longer prevail, that it is removed. You bring up a very good point that simple logic would suggest that if you had what amounted to a permanent addition to the structure that might not otherwise have been allowed, but was allowed because it was now fitting our definition of an Echo unit, it would be highly impractical, I think, to detach a unit of that type from the main structure. So once again, I've not read or investigated the model that's being used apparently in DuPage, but just simply on the surface, it seems like it might raise some interesting problems.
But the reason I bring that up is if you're a senior and you decide you want to increase your income, so you tell one of your sick old relatives to move in your house, and then you build an Echo home for yourself, and it's attached. And then you tell the senior that your cousin or your aunt or whatever, time to go, and now you move back in your house and you rent the Echo house out as a rental.
Dave?
Okay. But I guess, I thought of some options that the committee might want to consider for discussion on how they may want to choose to proceed. But I do think it's important to note is that the Will County zoning ordinance already does address related living units within the primary residence. And it prescribes requirements, regulations for related living within, again, somebody's home. And it talks about maximum one unit on a lot. They have to be located within the principal residential building. They have to be occupied by the owner. There's a certain percentage of living area that they can have, how many bedrooms they can have. So again, there already are some provisions for related living within the zoning ordinance, within the principal residential unit. So yes.
So you're saying that the Echo would transfer to related living when the other person died, and so that even though you probably couldn't get related living home built in that area, it's built already, so now it becomes that? It's confusing to me.
No, what I'm just saying is that you have two distinct, you have Echo unit, which is a detached temporary unit.
No, I was talking about what Don said, that if you had attached it to your house, like in DuPage, it's attached to your home. It's part of it. It looks like it's part of your home now. It is part of your home. So now that person's gone, you have that unit there, and you're like Kurt said, you're not going to take that unit down. It's impractical.
Yeah, I didn't get to addressing that. I was just discussing.
Yeah, we're talking about two different things.
The current ordinance does address related living already, but then more specifically with the temporary Echo units, I was going to suggest, some topics or some further consideration for the committee discussion as to what you might want to think about as to how to proceed with the current Echo process. Mr. Musis, before I see you, so before I go.
I'll wait for the chair to.
Go ahead, Jeff. You got a comment?
Yeah, well, first I want to support I do think we should go back to a special use process. But so many things have changed since we initiated this eco housing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it granny housing. I do think that we need to look at perhaps what type of units we would allow. To say we're going to allow trailers that are basically HUD certified, I think is a pretty broad base. Now, the and I'm going to refer more to the manufactured home industry. There really are manufactured homes, including they make what they call granny units for the specific use. They're all set up with some medical, how the movement takes place. I think not only do we need to go back to a special use permit, but we need to look at what type of units are we going to allow. When DuPage says they have to be attached to the house or to the main unit, doesn't mean they're part of the main unit. They're attached. So so it could be that one of these manufactured homes, it's kind of granny unit, you get a facade that looks like the rest of the house. So you could have a temporary unit that's attached to the house. So it's still temporary, I guess is my point, versus a permanent structure. So I think we need to go much further on what we expect in the way of design. I have a number of these, a couple of these in my district actually. Personally know one of the folks, they just basically put a 40-foot trailer out front next to the house. Even though they did kind of, they do have a walkway in between them. And there's a big difference between having a, say, manufactured home kind of granny unit than somebody finding a 1960 trailer that's still uncertified and say, here it is, and dumping it on the property. I think we need to be cognizant to what we're going to allow units to be. And the other part is maybe we're allowing too many square feet. When you say, well, we're going to allow them to have, a 2-bedroom or 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, is that really what a elderly or older person who is supposedly sick, they really need that? So I think, and I also, I guess I would have to say, I'm not exactly sure what the relative has to be, but I would restrict this to very close relatives. A grandparent, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, not your third cousin, kind of thing, So I think we need to look at the whole thing start out with the special use permit, and then maybe go through the ordinance. And I have to go too, so thanks for indulging.
Okay, Bob, you have to?
Yeah, I think eco housing is actually very important, and there's a lot of reasons behind it. And again, it's not being, I don't think, I've seen very few of them, but it is truly needed, the ones that are actually approved for that use. And you got to remember, it comes down to affordability. If you're going to move somebody in, a relative with special needs, it's very affordable to get that unattached unit and actually place it out there. And because you're not building another kitchen, you're not building another bathroom, and then you can also get them where they're handicap accessible now. So basically it's a ramp attached to the outside. And the building department does a very good job of requiring all the aspects of safety, tying them down, the type of foundation or temporary foundation underneath. But I think that we always are going to need that, especially with the economy and the way the future looks. This is a good, affordable alternative for housing. And anybody that actually watched the DIY TV shows now or whatever, actually they're downsizing, and it makes a whole lot of sense. Because if you have that person paying the electric bill, the heat bill or whatever, and again, they don't need that extra room in there or whatever. And again, I think we should always be careful too, as far as who we're going to determine can use it, because again, what's happening, and I actually have this in my family, where I have some distant cousins that actually, they special needs and are outliving their parents. So I mean, that we're looking at alternatives now for that type of thing. So I mean, again, this is a well needed program, and especially in the rural areas where you do have that option to do it versus an expensive addition on your house with all the other amenities that actually these provide. So I think it's a good thing that we need to look at. So,
Ray, you have a comment?
Yes. Recently, I've been contacted by a few residents as well as Mr. Gould, Ms. Freitag, regarding the issue down in District 6. Admittedly, you know, I believe that there are not many board members that probably even know what eco housing is. You know, so at first, when we were talking, the individual on the phone was talking about eco housing. Here I'm looking it up and trying to understand what an eco house really even is. We never dealt with that in my 12 years in my previous position, and now I see it before us. Well, I understand the desire to make sure that the price stays low enough because of its use. You know, you want to make sure you don't drive up the price, so I'm sure that was probably in the thinking of the county board back when they said that, you know, we could just handle these internally at the PZC, we won't have to go through the process, special use. I understood how they arrived at that. But looking at the other side, when there is opposition to things, and then reaching out to the county board, I definitely would support having the county board look at the special use and having that go through that process again, because I understand there are going to be times when eco housing may just not fit, may not be appropriate in a certain area, or maybe the residents feel that it doesn't fit. But it would allow us to be able to understand the district, the needs of our district, and be able to come forth with a recommendation from our own local area. So I believe that it should come through the county board in the future.
Judy?
Yeah, Dave, you were gonna give us a list of things to think about?
Well, I think I kind of know where this is going, but I'm just going to suggest, you know, there's different options where, you know, you could eliminate the echo, it could be modified and leave it as is. You can modify it with eligibility require a special use permit. So there's, you know, there's a variety of different things, but I think the sense of the board is really going back to a special use permit process. And perhaps looking at the types of units that be authorized, the size of them, the eligibility requirements, perhaps even the particular zoning districts where they can be even authorized as a special use.
You know, yeah, and the thing is with the special use, and there's a cost, and I have 3 elderly relatives, and believe me, if I could have convinced my husband to get a trailer my friend was selling, a mobile home they had bought, well, their house was knocked down by a tornado, and so they were living in it while they were rebuilding, I would have had my dad and my grandmother in that unit. But my father, my husband, for some reason, did not want to do that. So it became more difficult for me to have to drive to everybody's houses rather than put them in one. So I have personal, you know, I think it's really important to keep it. As far as a special use permit, what is the cost? Because both my relatives only had Social Security. They don't have any money because they hadn't worked. My grandmother's 100, so she hasn't worked for a really long time. And my father had a stroke at 57 and hasn't worked since then. So, you know, a lot of that burden has come onto me and my husband, and we have his mom as well. So we do a lot of support for those people right now out of our income. So I don't want it to be cost prohibitive for this. And I do understand that there are issues that people have, so maybe we should look at it, and I would really like to look at it very closely. And what is the cost for, would the cost be for that?
I anticipate with the residential special use be $675. You also have some other costs that are associated with the publication and notification expenses. But if there's a cost, you know, a concerning cost that the county has, then perhaps there could be a special provision within the fee schedule to address that type of special use permit request to try to, you know, buffer that. I mean, keep in mind, we're also trying to recoup the cost of the county to process the applications, but at the board's discretion, that may be an option.
And how long does that process take then for something like that to happen?
You know, there are ordinance requirements based upon state law for notification purposes. So you're at least from filing of a complete application to public hearing, typically at least about 45 days out. Then from there, you're typically 1 to 2 weeks to committee, and perhaps another 2 to 4 weeks to the board. So you could
So you're talking,
You're talking, you know, I'm breaking it down for you, but you're talking,
which could be a really long time.
you know, it could
Which
be
could be a
six.
really long time depending on your situation. I mean, I think it could be a long time. I'm willing to look at it, consider it. I know that we have issues out there. I'd like to support Don Gould and his residents, but I also know that for me, if you need to do it and make the decision, you're gonna do it now. You wanna do it as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, by providing them with the best, you know, best housing, which we have to get something that's HUD approved for living in as well. So I'll be open to this subject.
We had some speakers sign up if they'd like to come forward. State your name, please.
Good morning. My name is John Irvin. I'm an attorney in Wilmington. I'm here representing owners of two separate residential parcels on Thelma Drive in Wesley Township. And one is here today, the other works in a hospital and a very short staff, so she's unable to be here. And quite a few of the other residents on Thelma Drive would also be here, but they have full-time jobs and they're unable to be here. For those of you that may not know me, prior to entering private practice, I was an assistant state's attorney here in Will County for 25 years. I was in the civil division for 20 years and also chief of the civil division. And I represented the various county officials, county board, county executive, and the committees of the county board. The reason I'm here is in regards to the current echo zoning ordinance in the county. We're not here asking for a change or recommending you do away with it or anything like that. What we're here for is we're looking to see that the current echo zoning ordinance is enforced the way it's written. And the current zoning ordinance was amended back in 2012, became effective October 1st, 2012. There were many different changes that were made. One of the changes was to remove echo zoning, or echo units, from being a special use permit. And it changed it from being a special use permit to an accessory use. And the echo zoning ordinance had three sections. One dealt with purpose, another dealt with zoning districts in which it was allowed, and the third was entitled regulations. And in reviewing the records of the Will County Land Use and Development Committee that are online from 2008 up until October 1st, 2012, it appears that only once did an applicant come to this committee seeking a special use permit for an echo unit. And in that case, the Land Use Committee allowed or approved the application for a zoning echo unit that went on to the county board. And at the Land Use Committee, it was represented to the Land Use Committee that the purpose of the application for this echo unit was for the owner to care for an elderly mother. And that's in the listing of the purposes of the echo zoning ordinance, that the purpose is to care for an elderly relative or disabled relative. And the reason I'm here today is that there is a property owner at the end of Thelma Drive that appears intending to apply for an echo unit, and it does not appear to us that the purposes of the echo unit is met. We don't believe that there is any indication that the purpose of this unit is to provide for the care of an elderly individual or disabled individual that's a relative. It appears that this is the applicant is merely seeking to have additional residential structure on the property. So instead of just one residence, they want to have a second. And we don't believe that that's what the echo unit ordinance provides for. And so it appears that prior to the change in the ordinance from being a special use permit to being accessory use, the county board looked at the purpose and only granted a special use permit if the purpose was there, to care for an elderly relative. And I don't have anything in writing, but I believe that it's the interpretation of the current land use department that you don't have to comply with section 1 of of the echo zoning ordinance. You only need to comply with sections 2 and section 3. And we don't agree with that interpretation. We don't believe that was the county board's interpretation prior to the change in the county zoning ordinance, which we believe simply changed echo units from being a special use permit to an accessory use. So we don't see why all of a sudden you would disregard the purpose and allow anyone who is 62 years of age or older to apply for and get as an accessory use a echo unit on parcel property. I'm 62 years of age. I have a sister and brother-in-law. They live out of state. If they wanted to come live up in Will County, they don't have to look for another piece of property because under what we believe is the current interpretation of the zoning ordinance, they can just set up a temporary structure. And as long as I'm living there, I'm 62. I don't know how long I'm going to live, but my dad still, he lives with me 6 months of the year and 6 months with my sister in Florida, but he's 100. So if I live as long as he does, this temporary structure could be there 38 years or longer. And by the time I turn 100, my son is probably going to be 62, and he can let his children live there too. So we looked at the number of parcels where an echo unit could be allowed in unincorporated Will County, and it appears it could be upwards of 25,000. I don't know that too many people are aware of this. If they were, there may be more of these echo units. And I just don't believe that it's appropriate to allow these quote-unquote temporary structures unless it's to meet the purposes of the echo unit, which is to provide for care for elderly and disabled individuals. So in regards, there was a comment made about the DuPage ordinance in regards to echo. And they don't actually call it echo, but they require that a additional structure to care for another individual who's a relative must be attached to the main structure, main residence, and it has to appear to be one and the same residence. And the question was, what happens if they, no longer are using that? That ordinance provides that they either have to do away with it, or what they have to do is they have to convert it back from basically a 2-unit to a 1-unit. And that's what that provides for. And I do have a meeting with land use this Friday to review the purpose of the echo unit, because I simply don't believe that there should be allowance of 25,000 echo units in the county. It should be based upon need. And last month, before the PZC, there was another structure, another parcel property where an applicant wanted an echo unit. They only had to go to the PZC because they wanted a variance to increase the square footage of the echo unit and increase the size, the number of bedrooms from 2 to 3, I believe. So, but the land use department in recommending the variance for this echo unit specifically recognized that an echo unit is, quote, a temporary means to administer care to an elderly family member, unquote. So I believe that, based upon my understanding, if the purposes section of the ordinance is not followed, then why did they say that to the PZC, that the purpose of it is to provide for the care for an elderly relative? So that's why I'm here. And you may change the ordinance, you may keep it how it is, but what our position is that it should be enforced based upon all 3 sections of that ordinance and not just look at 2. We believe you need to take a look at it in terms of will it meet, will it provide individuals the care for their family members, as a last stop to wherever else they need to go, some sort of managed care or nursing home.
Okay, you'd like to have staff respond, or has the state's attorney looked at that? Are we applying the ordinance properly? What is your comment?
First, let me mention that in this particular instance that Mr. Urban is referring to, no application has been filed. So we're talking about a policy that we have, but it's being discussed in somewhat hypothetical situation, inasmuch as we have not been asked to make a determination on an application for Echo housing at this unit. Now, I don't mean to be disingenuous and suggest that somehow we don't know that the matter is under consideration by the current property owner, but I think it's important to point out that at this point in time, we have not made a judgment on that particular application because an application has not yet been received. But having said that, in dialogue with Mr. Urban and with the neighborhood, we once again, as we have on many prior occasions, turn to our legal counsel for advice on matters of interpretation, and we have been in touch with the state's attorneys on this on the matter of what definitional criteria applies to determine whether an individual application for an Echo unit does or does not meet the criteria of the ordinance. And I prefer, frankly, since this is a legal question, to defer to the state's attorney at this point on that matter.
Okay, Matt?
Well, Mr. Urban knows very well there's supposed to be a meeting between him and our office, I believe this Friday, so I'm not sure why he's here and presenting this in front of this committee. But notwithstanding, I have been approached with Ms. Tatro, and we've discussed this, and we believe it's our position. It is our position that we believe that the staff is enforcing the ordinance properly. All three provisions of the ECHO section 155-10.10-C contains three sections. We agree with Mr. Urban, all three provisions are read together. We disagree with Mr. Urban in that, in his interpretation, that the staff are interpreting it inappropriately or incorrectly. It is our position that they are applying it correctly.
Thank you. Any other comments by committee? Any other public comment? Would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. State your name, please.
My name is Carol Treadman, and I'm a resident on the road that is in question with this Echo home trailer, or whatever you want to call it. None of us were aware of what these are either. I'm here, I'm the only one that could get the day off of work, or they would all be here. We want to make it very, very clear. We are not here, we are not against Echo homes. We all have elderly parents that we didn't know these homes existed, and we may all qualify. I've lived out here my whole life. My father now qualifies, if we go according to the application process, as of right now, to be 62 years old only. This family at the end of the road is not disabled. They're not caring for an elderly adult. In my opinion, and everyone else on the road, it's not a personal thing with this family. It's like watching someone pull into a handicap spot that is not handicapped. That's not what these homes are for. They are for to take care of your elderly relatives. A lot of counties, we've looked into this, we all have full-time jobs. So this has been what I call my side job. I have learned more about these homes than I really needed to know. Some of them, yes, are attached. They do not have a front door. That's how they are attached. It is a doorway that goes from your home into this trailer. So that when the home leaves, it's not really, done a lot to the initial home itself. Most anywhere else that has these have rules of how long, they're temporary. What is temporary? Just like I said, it could go on and on and on. The basis of why I am here today is to let you all know we are not against Echo Homes any whatsoever. I think it's a wonderful program if it is not abused. I believe if you're not disabled and you are not taking care of a disabled person and you are 62 years of age, you can work, You've just bought a home, you're not disabled, then you're abusing the system. And that's all we're asking, that you do not let this be abused, whether you change the way it's written, because one lawyer can read it one way and another lawyer can read it another way. You know, I'm not sure, I'm not a lawyer. All we're asking is that you take a good look at this and maybe bring it back to somewhere where, in situations like this, where I understand they have not filed for this permit yet. I know that. We all know that. We do believe it is coming. And all we're asking is that you have some rule beyond the fact that you have to be 62 years of age.
We have a question for you.
I agree with you 100%. It should not be abused.
Thank you.
But I think I'm a little confused because I'm hearing that the application has not been filed. These houses are not been built, but yet there's somebody that's not eligible to be living there that should be there. Is there somebody living there now?
There is already a house on the property. There is a house on the property. So there's already people living there. There's an elderly couple, the Kellers, who I believe purchased this home.
Are one of the elderly individuals going to move into the Echo House?
I believe that's who's, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so
I believe, yes, I believe.
There's no Echo House there now.
There is no Echo
There is no
House right
Echo
now
House.
because they have not filed for the
There's
permit
no
yet. They got
application
the
and we don't even know
variance.
who's moving into it.
So this is a complaint prior to the application then?
Yes, because it was
Okay.
brought up at the PVC meeting, which once it goes through there, you can't appeal to anyone else. And at that meeting,
I think you can appeal a decision, can't you?
no.
But there's no application on file.
You know, like many of the things we deal with, it's matter that seem extremely confusing. The matters that were before the Planning and Zoning Commission was not a proposition of, shall there be an Echo housing unit? That wasn't what was before the Planning and Zoning Commission. What was before them, and Natalie, correct me if I'm not stating this exactly right, was on a matter unrelated to the Echo housing, which had to do with a proposed expansion of an existing storage building, and the way it was proposed to expand would have impacted a setback. So that was one variance. The other variance was that at that time, as people were contemplating the possibility of applying for an Echo unit, they had a preferred location on the lot where they wanted to put it. If they were to put it on that preferred location, it would have impinged upon the required setback. So they were obtaining a variance to, if they were to go forward with the Echo unit, would allow them to put it in this preferred location. So those were the only matters that were before the Planning and Zoning Commission. But yes, it's obvious that if you're talking about, this is why we want this setback variance, because of the possibility that at some future point, we may seek an Echo unit and place it there. If we are going to place it there, we're going to need to do it in a compliant manner, and that's what they were seeking the variance for.
I understand that, Kurt, but what I'm saying is how do we know that if we're not in compliance with the proper individual living there?
Well, that's an extremely good question. That's the entire point of the application process. You know, the witness can speak for herself. I'm not going to put words in her mouth. But, you know, my general impression is that people, based upon neighborhood discussion and so on, have made perhaps what may prove to be completely accurate and reasonable assumptions about what the actual application is going to be. But at the present time, no application has been made which would specify who was the owner of the property, who was going to be living in the unit, and did they provide the necessary documentation to establish their eligibility under the terms of the ordinance. So you can judge it however you want, but I think it really is a little premature in that we haven't received a formal application.
And if they are ineligible, the application
If they are, under the criteria of the ordinance as we currently interpret it, and in consultation with the state's attorney, we will apply our determination guided by the same criteria that we have always used to determine whether the evidentiary material that accompanies the application establishes their eligibility. I think the real argument here is that, as was very solidly put forth by Mr. Urban, is that he does not agree with the reading of the ordinance and the interpretation of the ordinance as to eligibility.
As far as the variances, so they're not appealable to the county board if they wanted to appeal a variance.
David, you want to comment? And this is on all variances.
I'd like to come on. I'll speak loud. There is no provision to appeal an approved variance to the board.
Okay.
The appeals that can go to the board are if there's a denial, then the petitioner can appeal to the board. And again, this is something else that we've consulted with the state's attorney's office on, because that was a question that had come up out of that initial zoning case. So therefore, the answer is no, you cannot appeal an approval.
Okay. Do you have any further comments?
No, I mean, they are correct. They have not filed for a permit. None of us are saying that they are. All we're asking is that you look into the ordinances that you have and enforce them to the purpose of what these homes are supposed to be used for. That's all we're asking.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any other comments by committee? We don't have any other business. I don't have any comments. Committee members, any comments? Anything else? Director? Any public comment? Anybody from the public? Any motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Adjourned.